and Zendesk. Okay, now we're ready to start with the learning. So as you know, we technically have an 8-person newsroom and have been reporting on how companies and organizations are evolving every day for more than 10 years. And for a snapshot of what's happening this year, I want to bring up my colleague and Technical.lys CEO, Chris Wink, to share a few big trends that we're seeing.
Wow. Hey there, VB.
Hey there, Chris.
Hey. Hopefully this is ringing through, echoing. Vincent, make sure to explore the studio space. You're here in the stage format now. You'll be clicking on sessions in about 9 minutes. But as Vincent alluded to, wanted to touch on a few things that we at Technically are seeing both in our reporting and in our listening to so many of you. So yeah, you're at this Introduced conference. We see it as something like our user conference. Building better workplaces is the promise of today. You will be full with sessions and conversations doing just that. And Vincent alluded to this phrase we use a lot, both in the newsroom and in our product team of company builders, company culture builders, workplace builders. The way I understand it is this cross-section of the founders, early employees, culture leads, operations professionals, and innovators. You're inside your organizations, expecting them to be more efficient, more productive, and oftentimes more equitable, which is absolutely a theme of the reporting we do. And so this is a messy year. Vincent alluded to the fact that this conference typically takes place in May. It is not May, and there's a few things happening. We have that pandemic and economic shock, a really unusual recession, which my economics nerds will grasp is a little bit different than the shock itself. With racial equity movement, accelerating climate change. We're going to have a contentious presidential election, and we still got time to spare. So I would imagine a lot of you are really interested in thinking about how that deploys inside your own organization. And that's something that we're thinking a lot about too. So 3 trends to perhaps start you off with the day. But I want to start with one that a friend said to me recently, reminded me that we ought not describe this year as a disruption. It's speeding what was already taking place. And that's good and bad. There are good trends that are happening. There are horrifying ones. But the point is that all of us as workplace professionals in all of our organizations, we now know without question how we respond in a crisis. And we expect and want this conference to be a kind of learning manual, a navigation manual, if it will, as it were, to help convey how you can navigate your career, but also how you can help navigate the work you do inside your workplaces. So the sessions today are rich and full of examples and case studies and lessons that you can take back to your organizations. So those trends, a couple trends to arm you with. Asynchronous work. In April, 2/3 of Americans are working from home. This is typically usually less than 5 to 7% before this year. More people than ever were exposed to this concept. Many of you probably already had some experience with it. I'll say even for us, we had experience with it, but it's a lot different when it's suddenly constant and at all times. Questions of childcare, new father here. This has changed our understanding of what the 9 to 5 can mean. And we're seeing in our reporting that it's tempered by work-life balance pushes. I think of it like this framing that I have here. Working until midnight is the bad. That means something is broken. Missed deadlines, perhaps missed team communication. Working at midnight, well, that depends on a lot of things. Do you have to take care of kids in the afternoon and suddenly pushing work to the evening is better? Are you simply a different or better kind of worker? Those are kinds of lessons that change what it means to have work at different times. And so this trend of asynchronous work is being sped both by remote and by the frank reality that we are seeing workplaces adapt to very different professionals in very different points in their lives. So I think that's something you should be armed with and taking with your organizations of, do we care more about getting the work done, or do we care more about when it happens? I think it's probably the former, not the latter. A second trend here that you wouldn't be surprised to learn that we think a lot about is risk to local. this push to remote, we're seeing some of the most successful, fastest growing companies that we report on are, of course, and no surprise, the first to call out that if they already were open to hiring remotely, that trend is being accelerated right now. That can be good for a lot of things. We can watch people move to low-cost centers. Our country has an enormous challenge with building enough housing capacity for the populations we have, particularly in centers. But that decentralization can really mean disproportionately impacting communities that are both underrepresented or underserved in economic contexts. So this is this trend of white flight to remote work, that where we see some of the most privileged firms kind of abandon that work inside cities, which often took place when your employees were on transit, when your employees were in and around lots of different socioeconomic circles. How much does that change when we can remote ourselves away from challenges in our communities? And I think a lot about whether place becomes endangered in a new way. If you may remember from reporting, we had a lot in the late 90s of this idea that, the internet is going to eradicate place. And then we came to find that was an exaggeration. We're now seeing another wave of understanding whether or not that's happening. Third and final point that I want to arm you with our last couple of minutes here is an idea of moral clarity. This is actually a phrase that is happening a lot in journalism circles, actually. But I think it carries weight and is a way to understand a lot of what we're seeing in organizations around our communities and beyond. You're probably seeing it in your own organization. The expectations for what your company and your leadership has to stand for is coming to an entirely new extreme. And in a lot of ways, it's very healthy. We likely don't want organizations that can ignore the reality of unarmed Black men being killed. We want organizations to make strong and clear stances around Black Lives Matter and then do the work of racial and income inequality. But this will continue to stretch what organizations think they can happen. That they can have happen. And I'll note this point that I would put with all of you as you go back to speak to your fellow organizational leaders. Not taking a stance is very much taking a stance. And that's something that we've pretty consistently seen in our reporting. This is not a question of opting in or opting out, but how you respond to the moments both of this year and beyond. And so ultimately, we think this does become a storytelling concept of how do you tell the story about your organization's priorities and why and who and when would people want to work there and do the work that you're working on. So those are a few lessons to look at. Asynchronous work, threat to local, moral clarity. We'll hear about a lot of those themes today. At the end of the day, this conference is meant to be introducing you to ideas, people, and opportunities that will build better workplaces. And that very much is our intention. And I think my colleague VB is going to hop back up and we're going to get you off to your sessions because that's where you're heading to next.
Indeed. Thank you for those insights, Chris. So now we're ready to begin the day. As a reminder, you'll be leaving this main stage portion. I know it's a beautiful virtual space, but you'll be leaving this portion to go to your session of choice, which is going to be an equally beautiful space. You won't return here until we chat with Guy Raz at 4 p.m. So sessions all day, back to the main stage at 4. Just as a primer, the first 3 sessions this morning are how do we transform the workplace, universities as economic drivers, and inclusive design workshop. So those are the 3 options that you have. As soon as I'm done talking, pick a spot and go. You find them on the agenda page in case you don't know the platform and want to navigate around, and then you can decide where you want to start from there. So be sure to have a great day. Share prolifically on social media using the hashtag PTW20 and enjoy. See you soon.